Okay, I think we're going to get started here shortly. Let me get get things moving. Give me just a moment. Send out a going live notification. A little bit early. But let's do, let me get stuff up here. Let's get everything set. My dog is going to be distracted during this, I'm sure. We'll see. Probably trim some of this later if I need to. Let's see. I started a little early, so anyone watching this, you're in on the ground floor, so to speak. So, all right, it's 8 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start this up. Hello, I'm Christiana Ellis, and I, on this channel, sometimes stream tabletop role-playing games. We've got a really long-running Dungeons & Dragons campaign, and then on Saturdays, sometimes we play other things, like we just finished up a game of After the War. But I thought today that I would talk a little bit about the new game coming from Roll20 called Bryte, using what they call the Bryte system, which is it's a neat setting and a neat set of rules that I find really interesting, and I kind of wanted to explore a little bit more. So what I figured I would start with just briefly is kind of a really basic summary of the setting, and then talk a little bit about what the character sheet looks like and how the basics of how the system works, and then we'll make a character. So if you're watching and you're new, welcome. If you want to say hi in the chat, welcome. Lurkers also fine, of course. And so let's go ahead and get started. So in Bryte, the setting is the Alaxis Galaxy. So we got a map here of Alaxis, and one of the things that's really critical to this setting, which you can see on this map, is if you notice all the way around the galaxy here, there's what they call the burn. And that's because in this galaxy, the entire galaxy is surrounded by this strange phenomena that seems to be destroying everything it touches, and it's surrounding the galaxy on all sides and gradually encroaching inward, basically consuming the galaxy, and it seems nobody knows how to stop it or what can be done about it. And so the idea of it might mean the end of the universe as far as anybody in the galaxy knows, but that's a long way away, and yet it's not so long away for the systems that are near the edge right now. So everyone is kind of trying to move towards the center, and there's population pressure as people want to live in places that's far away from the burn. So even though it would probably take hundreds and hundreds of years to consume the whole galaxy, you want as much time as you can. So everyone's kind of fighting over the central parts. And I think that that's kind of a neat, it's a neat sort of bittersweet idea of having the tone of the game sort of right there require this idea of contemplating possible mortality of the entire known universe, or at least the galaxy, but as a long way away, and the idea of finding hope where you can, even under that circumstance. I think that's kind of a neat idea. But so that's kind of the basic premise of the setting. And then within this galaxy, there are lots of different alien races, and we're going to talk about some of them when we build a character. One of the other things that I think is interesting about this game is that there are no humans, or even aliens that are mostly like humans, right? You know, this is not Star Wars where there's a bunch of, you know, like they're not from Earth, but my dog is requesting my attention. So in this game, yeah, there is no human analog. Like there are various different sort of humanoid races, but none of them are just straight up humans. I think that's kind of neat also. So let's see what else. So I think that's the basic premise of this, you know, the overall large scale setting. Obviously there's a lot of detail within individual systems and different alien races. Oh, thank you, Glimmerville, for the bits. Much appreciated. So let's look at what the character sheet looks like first. And then we'll talk a little bit. So this is a character that I made in advance just to kind of show off this, and then we're going to make a new one when we get to it. But what I wanted to first do is just kind of show off a couple of things. So this character sheet here, oh, let me move it so it's not blocked by my pretty face. So we have, you know, spot for the name, character name, species, and culture is important because every species has their own unique species abilities, but their things like stats and how good you are at skills doesn't come from that. It comes from your culture, meaning like where you grew up, and that could be anywhere, even for any system. And so we're going to see when we go through the character creation process that depending on which system you pick or what kind of culture you came from, it gives you different sorts of power-ups of different things. So you can see that right here, the below here, it talks about the properties of the Bryte system culture. So it was open borders, partitioned diversity, wealthy economic status, and rural population density. Ah, hi, Rachel. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So then we've got health level, which is basically sort of like, you know, sort of, it's like hit points, except that, you know, you're never going to get to the level of hit points that you would expect in something like Dungeons and Dragons. Things have much lower levels of hit points just generally here. And then this character has a personal shield, so there's 2 charges of that personal shield. Movement speed is in units of squares, so it does use, you know, a 5-foot square battle grid when you want to do combat. These things here are for conditions, which we'll talk a little bit about, but you can have both positive and negative conditions. And there's minor conditions, which would affect 1 skill. And so a minor positive condition would give you a temporary bonus to 1 skill. Likewise, a minor negative condition gives you a temporary bonus to, or a temporary penalty to 1 skill. And then likewise, moderate conditions, either positive or negative, affect a whole class of skills, like all your mental skills or all your physical skills. And then a significant condition, either positive or negative, affects all your skills. So how do skills work? Well, every skill is assigned a die size, like D4, D6, D8, D10, D12. And then the difficulty of a check is a number that's going to start at 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And so the way it works, if you want to make a, let's see, so like this character here has a D6 for engineering, and if we wanted to make an engineering check that had a difficulty of 3, what that means is we would roll 3d6, and we can just do that from here. And we don't have a condition bonus marked here, but, you know, just for the sake of it. Oh, let me pull up the, you know, show on the dice roller here. What it's doing is we roll the 3d6, and what it's looking for is to see if any of them are matching. So we got a 6, a 5, and a 3. Those are all different from each other, and so that's a pass, which would mean it's a successful check. But if we did a couple more of those, oh, see, we did another one, and now there's 2 6s, which creates a match, meaning that check fails. And that's how skill checks work. And one of the things that I think is interesting about this system is it's very explicit with the idea that the game master does not tell the player which skill to use. So whereas in something like Dungeons and Dragons, I might say to a player as the DM, I would say, uh-oh, there are some guards coming. If you want to hide, make a stealth check. Well, in this game, what I would say is, there's some guards coming. If you want to hide, tell me how you hide. And the difficulty is 3. And at that point, the player can choose any skill they want. Getting notifications on my phone. They can choose any skill they want and try to justify why, for example, they want to use athletics to hide, and the justification is they scramble up into the branches of a tree. And so because the difficulty is 3, they would make an athletics check of difficulty 3. Or what if they said, I want to use my deceive skill to, instead of hiding, I want to just make them believe that I'm supposed to be there, and so they don't even think anything about it. I don't have to be invisible. I trick them into thinking that I'm allowed to be there. Or alternately, I trick them into looking the other way at the crucial moment. Or you could say, I want to use presence skill to just say, I just intimidate them into leaving us alone even if they see us, right? And so the idea is the player can choose any skill they want. Now, obviously, there are going to be some skills in some circumstances that it's really hard to kind of understand how that would work. So, for example, if there's a big crevasse that needs to be gotten across, it's hard to understand how Streetwise would apply to crossing a crevasse, right? It might be hard to justify. Oh, buddy, sorry. Okay, live streaming, everybody. My dog has literally just chewed through my headphone cord. Rocket, these were my nice headphones, buddy. Oh. Oh, boy. Well, that's not ideal. That's disappointing, actually. Okay, well, I don't need them right at the moment, but dude. Yeah, okay. Let me briefly show this very cute little dog here who is now feeling very sorry for having been busted chewing up headphone cables. Yeah. So anyway, he's a good dog usually. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. So the idea is that there might be some skills where it's going to be harder to justify. And so the game master can say, I don't think you can use that skill. Yeah, choose something else. But the rule book, the core rule book says that if the player can come up with a justification that makes even a little bit of sense, you should let them do it. That should be the threshold. That's the intended threshold in this game, is that it requires the players to be a little bit more active and creative in that regard than something like Dungeons and Dragons, where they're always told what skill they should use in any given circumstance, right? So if the and so some players might not be used to that and having to come up with using some other skill or justifying it. But I think that that's a neat element. So in chat, Rachel says, kind of reminds me of Numenera. I've not really ever looked closely at Numenera, so I can't really confirm that, but that's interesting. But so one of the last little bits, though, that when it comes down to this idea of the player can choose which skill they want to use, well, as we've just established, we have higher die sizes for different skills. So, like, you know, if you're going to roll 3 dice and you don't want any matches, then obviously the higher size of dice you use, it's much easier to avoid getting matches for 3d12s than it is for 3d4s, right? So why wouldn't you just always use your best skills? Well, that's why they have something called Nova points. And so what happens is, in the game, when you make a roll with a d4 skill, you mark it off. And you don't have to succeed, it's just you have to make the attempt. So whether you succeed or you fail on that attempt, you mark it off. And then once you've used a skill for all 5 dice sizes, you get a Nova point. And Nova points let you do certain sorts of special abilities and everything. And so that's how it encourages you to use a variety of your skills rather than just always use your best skills. And I'm sorry about my dog. I'm not sure why he's so anxious right at the moment. He usually is a little more chill when I'm streaming in the evening, but you know, what are you going to do? The weather's been really hot. It has him a little bit antsier than usual. Welcome, Meso. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but welcome. Dog does love Burn Bryte, absolutely. His name is Rocket, so it's like thematically appropriate. And so that's the basics of, you know, what we have here on this primary page of a character sheet. So let's talk about some of the other stuff. So we have here different tabs where we could mark down any conditions that we might have to say what they are. Macio. Okay, yeah, great. Welcome. And then you have the equipment tab here where it lists, you know, what you have on your equipment list and what each of them does, your weapons, your shield generators, and so on. You know, pretty standard stuff. So you have your Nova abilities here, and so like these are the things like that you can do when you have Nova points. And then special abilities are also based on which species you are, and you select them from a list, and there's lots to choose from. And so those are things that you can do under various circumstances. And for example, it might be that, under a certain circumstance, you get a positive condition, or you can do extra damage under certain circumstances, that sort of thing. But last but not least, let's talk just a little bit about story paths. One of the things that I think is true of just about any tabletop role-playing game is when you want to say, what is the game really about? What you have to look at is, what does the game reward players for doing? And when we say reward, obviously we could talk about just like the satisfaction of a good story, but what we also talk about is leveling up, right? Like when do you let the player character advance their character and level up? Well, in Dungeons and Dragons, say it's when they get experience points, which they get by, you know, killing stuff. Or, you know, obviously within with the, you know, Dungeon Master can have discretion to give them experience for other things. But in this context, the way you advance your character is by choosing and then completing what's called a story path. And what that entails is you essentially deciding on a short, like a medium length story arc that you want your character to go on. And so what that means is maybe you want your character to be a mentor for someone. Maybe you want your character to create a great work of art. Maybe you want them to fall in love. Maybe you want them to go on the run. Or, you know, there's this long list of these story paths where you essentially want to have your character go through that. And there are various stages along the way, and as you complete each stage of that, you get bonuses. And so it's a way of having the mechanics of the game help you, actively help you and encourage you and drive the narrative to tell the kinds of stories you want it to tell, which I think is really cool. So, having talked a little bit about, like, this is what character sheets look like and here's the various pieces of it, let's make a character. So, I have already just started, just opened up a brand new thing. So this is what opens up when you say you want to make a new character. I think it's possible that this is going to look a little, some of the text on here is going to look a little bit small for the stream, but we're going to be talking through it anyway. All it really says here is that, you know, we're going to use the Charactermancer system for doing you know, our character creation. So go ahead and click next. So here's a spot character name, and we could you know, I always come up with the names for my characters last. So I'm gonna just use I'm just gonna say for now the name is Placeholder Jones. But the next thing that we choose is the species, and it comes up with compendium content here where it's talking about, here's the basic concept of, you know, choosing a species, and that each species is going to have special abilities associated with it. So in this game there are 8 playable races we can choose from. So let's take a look at each of them and then pick one and move forward with it. Sorry, I'm paranoid about my dog now because he ruined my headphones. All right, so first up is Driftling. And so we got an image here. Let me see if I can... Yeah, see, unfortunately, I can't change the layout of this as much as I would have liked, you know, to just kind of have it here. I feel like I would like it to be bigger on the screen, but oh well. A Driftling, so we have a piece of artwork here, but one of the things that's notable about this this piece of artwork is that the Driftling's actual primary trait is that they can change their shape to look like anything they want. So in this context, this character having extra arms and these weird little horns and stuff like that is actually because those are traits that belong to some of the other races, and so this particular Driftling has adapted traits from some other species, because what a Driftling's big thing basically is that they can change their shape to look like anything they want. They can even change their shape to make themselves bigger or smaller. A standard character, what we might think of as a medium creature in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, would be size 1. And you can make your size as big as size 2 or as small as size 1/4. And you can also change all sorts of other features. Oh, there's a suggestion in the chat to, yeah, we can pull up the compendium page rather than just use the Charactermancer one here. And that will probably give us a little bit more control over the, yeah, there we go. So yeah, there we go. See, look at that guy. So we have, as part of this, we're not going to read all of this for all of these races because we kind of get through stuff. But I've kind of reviewed them ahead of time. And so, like I said, the basic idea for a Driftling is that they can do whatever, they can look like anything they want, and they can change their shape to whatever they wanted, but it takes time to do it. But for example, you can actually get, as some of your special abilities or Nova abilities with Driftling, the ability to change your shape much more quickly. So that's one species. The next species is called a Glean. I think it's probably just, I don't think it's Glean, I think it's just Glean. But look at these guys. Tentacled, feathered, aquatic creatures that are actually able to move around outside of the water as well, because they've got magic associated with them. Some of the neat backstory with these is that they were creatures that were smart but had a very short lifespan for a lot of their history, and so weren't really able to advance very far just because, any individual didn't really have the opportunity to live long enough to become as much of a specialist as, you know, some races needed. But there are these ancient beings known as omniscients, that one of them came down and basically gave the Gleans the ability to connect to a reliquary, which is basically sort of a fancy little magical computer thing that they can integrate with that gives them a much longer lifespan. And there are different types of reliquary that they can get that give them slightly different personality influences. And so that's, you know, that's what these guys are. I don't know why my dog is so rambunctious this evening. I'm sorry about the barking. I hope no one minds. So that's the Glean. Eno, without wanting to be dismissive about it, Eno are cat people. I mean, it's like, you know, do we have to, whoops, I'm not being dismissive about it, because they are very cool, but what they are is cat people. You know, so in fact, I would think they're actually the closest to sort of standard humanoid, I think, of all the different species. Yeah, correct that there's no tail. But yeah, you know, otherwise, you know, they are what they are there. One of the things about like their culture in the base setting is that they are kind of more isolated within themselves than integrated with the other civilizations, but not to the exclusion. Like, it makes it clear, like, that doesn't mean everybody in the Eno is. It's just that's kind of where most of them are. So then we've got Kithook. Kithook are these little guys, these four-armed bug people. And they have the forearms, and so therefore, like when we saw the Driftling earlier that had the forearms, is like he's borrowing that from the Kithook here. And the Kithook, in some ways, they have a culture kind of like, you know, a little bit like warrior monks sort of thing. But they can like evolve into their own, you know, more modifications. Like they can get 4 legs, or they can get wings, and that sort of thing. And so that's basically what these guys are. Peacecraft is evidence that some of the people making this game really like the old Transformers cartoon. Because Peacecraft are essentially living mechs that are, you know, they are size 2, so they're much bigger than all of the other races, and they all have within them a cockpit that a smaller creature can ride around in, and like a pilot. And they're like, it's very evocative of Transformers, which is definitely a positive if you like the old Transformers cartoon. And so one of their things too is that they are technically, they're immortal in the sense that they work kind of like the Cylons from the old, the more recent Battlestar Galactica, in the sense that if you destroy their physical form, their consciousness wakes up in a new body back on their home planet. So it's not like they just wake up or they don't die. You know, you would still have to like go get them, but they would be there. But one of the things that's interesting in terms of their culture here is that they have been like that for a long time, but when the burn showed up, they discovered that any Peacecraft who went into the burn didn't come back. They didn't wake up back on the home planet. And so it was for them the first time in their existence that a Peacecraft could just be utterly wiped out of existence. And so that's scary for them, right? But so they're very cool. Rornan look, it's a swarm of bugs. It's a swarm of bugs. It's basically a little hive mind swarm of bugs is what the Rornan are. They also have some neat stuff in their storyline where it used to be that all Rornan were one big hive mind, but then basically something happened that prevented them from being one big hive mind, and now they're split out into a bunch of different individual subgroups. And so if you were playing a Rornan, you would be Like, you are a hive mind within the swarm that you've got there, but you are not connected to other swarms of Rornan. But, obviously, we can see here, there's some shape changing stuff, like you just carry stuff around inside your swarm, that sort of thing. You could, like, go under the crack of a door or something like that because you're a swarm of bugs. I think that's pretty fun. And then there's Ulran, which are basically like, they're mineral people, and they get, so they're sort of made of like rocks and mineral, and then they get these sort of crystalline protrusions. The idea is that as they age, more and more of their body turns into sort of hardened, inert crystal. And so, like, that's kind of their aging process. And so the idea is that, like, dying of old age for them is when you have finally been so covered in crystal that you just can't move at all anymore. And yeah, so that's kind of their thing. And they can do a lot of, like, light and radiation based stuff. And then last but not least of the playable races here are the Zivoi, which, first of all, look at this weird slug guy, right? But one of the things that their species can do that's notable is that they can inhabit corpses of any other species and then ride them around like a puppet, like a meat suit. So, like, if there's a dead body of any other species, the Zivoi can just basically, like, go into it and then drive it around and control it and essentially sort of be that body. And I think that's pretty neat too. So those are the different races that we have to choose from. Does anyone in the chat have a strong preference over which one of those you feel like you would like to see us make a character of? Or if you have any other questions, things that we could look up, and I could pull up a little bit more detail on any of these. And so from the character mancer here, obviously we can select all of these, and and it pulls up the information there. And then, for example, the Glean here is, some of them have this subcategory, like where you would say which of the reliquaries this Glean has, that sort of thing. So I'm waiting to see if anyone in the chat wants to just shout out an option. Otherwise, I'll probably roll a d8 for it and see. Oh, we've got a suggestion. Let's make a Kithook. I think I'm saying that right. And that works. Congratulations for being first on the draw. You get to choose. So we're going to make a Kithook. All right. So next, so now that we've chosen the species, actually, maybe we have an opportunity here because we've got the compendium for it, so we can scroll down and say, what kind of names do the Kithook have? Kithooks typically have two names, first name and a family name, the combination of their parents' family names. First names are usually short. So, like, example, Kithook first names: Kulo, Ferg, Griza, Cree, Mel, Narwak, Silo, Yawa. And then Bretigil, Dalkoas, Globtrot. Globtrot is pretty good. I think that our Kithook, yeah. So so I think our Kithook is going to be named Griza Globtrot. So placeholder Jones now becomes Griza Globtrot. Okay, so now that we've got a name and a species, click next. So culture. As I mentioned before when I was talking about the character sheet, it lists here a bunch of the different known systems in the base setting and what parameters those systems have as far as borders, diversity, economics, and density. And so borders can be either open, isolationist, or selective. And so selective would be like they admit some outsiders but not everybody. Open would be Anybody can come, obviously. Isolationist. Isolationist. And then diversity would be, you know, can be inclusive, partitioned, or homogenous, right? Straightforward. And then economics, you know, poor, wealthy, or intermediate. Density, rural, urban, or suburban, right? Now, each of those parameters, whatever the culture you choose is, you get more, like, you get different starting boosts. And so for just to highlight that, I'm going to choose custom, where it allows you to just select each of those from individual pull downs instead of using one of these. And just, I'm going to do this just to kind of show what each option gives. So like with borders, if you have open borders, then what you get from being coming from a culture that has open borders, you increase the die value of any skill to a D10, die value of any 2 skills to a D8, and any 3 skills to a D6, increase the die value of a physical skill to a D10, and the die value of a social skill to a D12. But if you were selective instead, instead of it's a physical D10 and a social D12, you get mental D12 and social D10. And, you know, and isolationist, you're basically getting a mental D10 and a physical D12. Now, I'm not going to right now for this talk through like why that would be for all of these necessarily, but again, a lot of it would come down to this idea of like, well, if it's isolationist, you know, you might have to, this might be a place where, you know, you have to do a lot of like, you know, physical labor and have the smarts, but you don't necessarily have to get used to dealing with lots of people who are very different from you. And so your mental and physical might be strong, but not as strong with the social, for example. Like, and that's just kind of starting bonuses because you can really kind of do anything you want. And then likewise for density, if you're rural, you choose increase the die value of any 2 skills by 1, which would be basically if you had it at a D6, you could choose this and it would make it a D8 instead. But if you have suburban, instead of getting those dice bonuses, you start with 5,000 argent, which is essentially money. And one brief thing that I think is cool about this setting is argent, which is the money, is literally a replicating magical organism, kind of like coral, in the sense that just like you could put money in a bank and earn interest, if you put argent in a sealed container with the right conditions, it can literally like grow itself and replicate over a period of time. And so you have to, you can save your argent and seal it away in a special way, and eventually it'll grow more of itself. I just think that's kind of a neat thing. But so, and then versus if you were in urban culture, you gain a special ability from your own species, right? So this is where some of the different features come in. And then diversity, likewise, if it's inclusive, you get some money and a special ability, and then 2 Nova abilities. If it's homogeneous, I don't know why that's not coming. Homogeneous is not coming up to show the bonus for that. I'm not sure why. But partitioned would be increase the die value of any 3 skills to a D6, gain special ability, gain 2 Nova abilities. And versus, you know, so you're getting more dice bonuses versus getting more money. And then economics is kind of the same thing. Like if it's poor, you have a smaller amount of starting money, but you gain a special ability because like maybe you would have had to like sort of work harder on some things to get by because you don't have the money. Intermediate, you have slightly more money, you get some die bonuses, and then if you're wealthy, you don't get any bonuses, but you start with a lot of money. Oh, thankfully in chat we've got homogeneous culture gives a bonus of you gain 2 special abilities and 2 Nova abilities. So let's go ahead though and briefly let's just go ahead and say this Kithook is from the Kithook homeworld, which is, let's see, Chidus? Let's see, which one? Oh no, so their original homeworld has already been consumed by the burn. So they don't have like a specific system that they all live on. You know what? Let's do Selah, which is, Selah is like this big sort of refugee station that's made by this Alliance of Relief and Conversation, and it's become kind of its own whole city place that is all from people who are refugees from elsewhere. So let's just pick that as a place, just because, you know, I'd shout it out in chat to say let everyone else pick again, but I think there's kind of too many options for that for it to be easy to just yell it out. But so let's just go ahead and pick that one. So what are the properties of Selah? Well, it has open borders, it is urban density, diversity is inclusive, and economics intermediate. All right, so let's just choose that and move forward. So now, story path. We have to decide what would we want the character arc, the first character arc for this character to be. And there's a lot to choose from. See, look how long this list is, all these different things. So, accompany, artifact unleashed, battle, best friend, bond, con, contest, create masterpiece, discovery, double life, enlightenment, face fear, fated, gain followers, heist, hunt, innovate, love, mentor, mourning, mystery, negotiation, no questions asked. Ooh, I feel like I want to know what that is. No questions asked. You agree to take on a job without knowing its consequences. This job comes from a source that is unknown or untrustworthy, but on account of blackmail, money, or curiosity, you take it. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems. So, just as an example, what if we chose this story path? The way that would work is, in addition to just following the standard adventure that might be presented by the GM, you're going to be on the lookout for your character for opportunities to complete these various things. So the very first one would be the offer. So once you have taken the job in question, you would complete this first event. And then at some point in that story, there's going to be a complication. Like, uh-oh, this wasn't part of the plan, but now we have to deal with this too, right? And so when that happens, you complete that event, you get another bonus. So like the first bonus, you get a new special ability. Second bonus, you get to increase one of your social skills by one. And then a warning, like, uh-oh, now there's someone has warned you that it's maybe even worse than you thought. Fourth, what am I doing? You complete this event when you take action to better understand the consequences of your job. So that might be where you start saying, maybe we're finally going to look inside this box they told us not to look in, because we need to know what's actually in there. And so, for example, once you get to that point, you get these skill bonuses, and then when you complete this story path, in this case, do you perform the job knowing the consequences? And you can choose at that point to decide if you complete the job or if you sabotage it, you get one bonus, and then if you choose to just walk away from the job, you get a different bonus. And that's how you complete a story path. Now, obviously, this requires a lot of cooperation between the game master and the players, because not everyone's going to have the like, if you don't have that cooperation, what if the GM just never really presents you with the opportunities to do your story path things, right? So that's just where it's important for a game of this type to have the game master be very on board with trying to present the players with opportunities to complete their story path activities. And it suggests as a rough pace that perhaps for every 2 hours of play, one character in the party might get to do one of their story things. And then you kind of try to, have it spaced out so that everybody's getting to do some. So that's one example of a story path. Let's look at some of the others here. We've got On the Run, preservation, protection, rebellion, recover, redemption, revenge, rivalry, seek fame, smuggling, stranger in a strange land, student, survey, survive, temptation, thicker than water, and upgrade. Did any of those leap out to anybody? Does any of those seem just really exciting? You want to know more? I think the just the concept of the story paths is really neat because it really inspires the players, I think, to be proactive and creative in deciding what kind of story they want their characters to have. Because, you know, everyone knows that you tend to have, in the really satisfying campaigns, there's an overall big story, but you also have little character arcs for everybody. And this gives a lot more agency in kind of trying to decide what you want your character arc to be. So we can repeat them again. Yeah, so we've got a company. Well, here, let's see also if I can try to make that. Trying to. Oh, you know what? It's interesting. When I do the pull down here, it doesn't show that on the stream. That's kind of interesting. You know, so like I have to actually select it all the way to for it to show up. So to reread the list here, we've got a company, artifact unleashed, battle, battle, best friend, or excuse me, beast friend, bond, con, contest, create masterpiece, discovery, double life, enlightenment, face fear, fated, gain followers, heist, hunt, innovate, love, mentor, mourning, mystery, negotiation, no questions asked, on the run, preservation, protection, rebellion, recover, redemption, revenge, rivalry, seek fame, smuggling, stranger in a strange land, student, survey, survive, temptation, and thicker than water, and last but not least, upgrade. Fated, so it's actually fated, like from fate, but yeah, let's take a look at that one. So someone or something has shown you what your future looks like. Will you fight against that which has been foretold, or do you embrace your destiny? And you want to, if you could explore free will versus fate, and like it's important, and I think it's definitely interesting that they establish this early on in the character creation process, because it's really, if you think about it, it's part of kind of deciding who your character is. So yeah, let's well, so we've also got a request in the chat to take a look at love. So let's look at that one, because certainly that's one that's like a little atypical for a sort of Dungeons and Dragons type campaign. You don't often have that. Sometimes it can come in, but so love would be you begin a romantic relationship that can be of any nature you choose. The number of other people in the relationship and their sexuality is determined by you. I remember hearing an example of how like you could choose to fall in love with the intelligence of your ship, for example. Another good point in there that you can, because all of these story paths all have different directions they can go at the end. So like for love, if you stay together, you get one ability, and if you end the relationship, you get a different ability. Likewise with fated, you know, if there's one reward if the event went as it was foretold, or a different one if it didn't go as foretold. And so you could also, for example, do the same one again. Like if you, you know, if you had a fall in love thing, but the way that story went, you know, that character, it didn't work out, and you decided to not have that romance, you know, continue, and like you ended that relationship, you could still choose to have your next story path be love again and go through that with a different character, right? and that sort of thing. One of the things too related to the ship's intelligence that we haven't talked about so far is that all ships have what's known as an MI, which is magical intelligence. And there's actually a whole history about why it's magical intelligence and not artificial intelligence. And mostly that's because when artificial intelligence was invented, they all went homicidal and had to be destroyed. So now there's magical intelligence, which is kind of just artificial intelligence again, and they're super convenient and we need them, and they haven't gone homicidal yet, so we kind of pretend that they're more different than they actually are. But yeah, so they, you have sort of this magical intelligence that exists in its own sort of cyberspace that you can sort of jack into and interact with. And so, yeah, and so like the way it would work in a game is that once you have completed a story path, you can start another one. And in theory, you could also even start a second one while you're still in the middle of one, but I think that's kind of non-optimal, right? I mean, what's the value in doing that, really? I mean, you could, like, it's not against the rules, I don't think, but I think that potentially complicates your ability to actually have the story arcs feel meaningful. But so in any case, do we have some votes for any of these? Do we want to talk about? We've talked a bunch about love. Do we want to have our Kithook fall in love? This Kithook refugee has to go and fall in love with someone. That could be fun. So space love. Yeah, so in this case, the what it would be is, the first event would be love connection. When you meet with one or more romantic partners and all parties realize and acknowledge there's a romantic connection. Second, third, or fourth event, and the way they say second, third, or fourth is because there's 3 of them that can happen in any order. You need to do all 3, but you don't have to do them in a specific order. And so it would be see who we really are, and it would be you do that after you and your partners show each other a side of yourselves that's, intimate, right? And you make yourself vulnerable for them, or share something that you don't usually share with someone else. Confront differences, and then do your own thing, which is you would have to have, take some time away from that character to, how do you feel about that? And then, of course, the 5th one would be commitment, where you decide you stay together or not. I think that's kind of fun. So we have this Kithook, this Kithook space bug who wants to be in space love. I think that's adorable. So yeah, let's go ahead and we are choosing the love story path then. And so now skills, computer skills, programming skills, nunchuck skills. Now this screen is potentially confusing at first because it's just got a lot of numbers on it and it's not always exactly obvious how it should work, but let me walk you through it. So first of all, up here we see where it says mental. All the skills are divided into mental, physical, and social. And so you have these little tabs to switch between those. And you see as we start here, they're all D4s because that's sort of the lowest, the lowest die that it could be. And, when we talked about how the dice checks work, a difficulty 4 check is the highest difficulty you could possibly do with a D4, right? Because you could roll a 1, 2, 3, and 4, but even one more die and it would have to match one of those. And even that would be relatively unlikely, right? So that's why, represents the skills you're not as good at. But so this is where the things from culture come in, right? All of these different bonuses that we got from the culture come into play here. And so this table is intended to tell us what we have coming to us as a result of those bonuses. And so what we have from those bonuses is any skill can be made D6, so we have 3 of those. Any 3 skills can be made a D6. Any 2 skills can be made a D8. Any one skill can be made a D10, and then we have here, this is +1, and so that means that once we have assigned all of our other D values, we can take 2 of those and give them a +1 bonus. And what that would mean is, like, for example, if you have a D10 and you apply the +1 to it, it would make it 1 size bigger, a D12. And then we have this physical, which means we have one where we can make a D10 out of a physical skill, right? Like, this one can't be just anything, it has to be one of the physical ones. Likewise, we have a social one that we can make a D12, but it has to be social, right? So that's how it works, and as we start assigning them, it will reflect on the table here. So that's how, you know, you can kind of see what happens. Like, so it is a little confusing to deal with at first, but that's just because you actually have, like, a lot of choices. It's a little more complicated than just saying you either have proficiency or you don't, and you choose 3 of them or whatever, like in Dungeons and Dragons or something. But so let's start thinking about this Kithook, and what do we want this Kithook to be good at? Like, what do we want? What's his, you know, and in fact, I'm actually just saying his, you know, like, maybe that's this Kithook. You know, in fact, actually, let's briefly look up what is the, you know, what is the standard, you know, are there genders for Kithook? What is their deal? Let's see. I'm looking. So one of the things that is interesting to note here, when we look at the culture of it, Kithooks practice Nolo, which is a religion with 3 deities. One, Faza, the goddess of the past, Alut, god of the present, and Tala, the mysterious deity of the future, who sends visions to the oracle. So that's that, you know, there's a god and a goddess, so I guess they probably do have genders. I'm not sure why I sort of defaulted. Maybe it's just my own bias of this bug person kind of reads slightly masculine to me. I don't know. Does anyone have strong feelings about that? It was kind of just my sort of default in my head to say he. But the other thing we have to do is just start thinking, like, what are they good at, right? So just if we look at, we have one physical that we can make a D10, which is the second best size of die, and then a social one that we can make a D12. And if we want our character to fall in love, we, I think we would, you know, I mean, I think, you know, I think the defaulting to male might in this case just be because, you know, as a beetle person, it's not as obvious what their, you know, they're not mammalian, right? And so the secondary sex characteristics that we might expect from a mammal are not present. But so let's think about, what do we want our Kithook to be? What do we want our Kithooks to be good at? So, well, we want them to fall in love, and so that suggests some level of social interest, at least, where it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be great at all of that stuff. We could have them be a little bit hapless, like they're lonely and they desire love, even though they're not actually good at social things. But I think let's go ahead and say, for social, we get a D12 for a social skill. Let's go ahead and say empathy. I think that makes sense as something. So what that means is, empathy would now be our Kithook's best skill so far as a D12. Now, we might end up with something else that's also a D12. But you notice when I took this pull down menu and I took the skill for empathy and I take D4, and we've got the social D12 down here. When I make this a D12, see it turn to a 0 down there. And that's how we indicate that it's, you know, that's, so once all of these are zeros, that's when we know we have assigned all of our skills properly. I think also what I saw actually a bit of artwork recently when we're talking about like how does this this insect person read emotions for either each other or also for other species. And you know, we would imagine that they have different ways of demonstrating different emotions, right? You know, like they've got their little antennae. Maybe laughing for them is the little antennae like rubbed together, or maybe you know, like when they kind of sort of fold back downward, that's anger or something like that. You know what? It's interesting. I just realized. Probably when I save it, it'll update the name there. But so we've chosen empathy as a high skill. So let's go back to physical, and we've got a D10 to assign. And so our skills. Let's talk briefly about the skills. So the mental skills are computers, engineering, medicine, knowledge, perception, streetwise. Physical skills, athletics, melee, power, ranged, skullduggery, and stealth. And then social, deceive, decorum, empathy, perform, presence, and suave. And so let's see. The Kithook don't have wings by default, but they have they can take a special ability to evolve wings and have wings and fly with them. So let's start assigning some of these other skills, right? You know, so let's say what sort of you know, because there aren't classes here where it makes them, you know, super like. It's not like Dungeons and Dragons where you say, oh, well, if you're a rogue, you better make sure you have all the rogue skills, right? You know, it's not like that. You have to just decide what do you want them to be good at. And so that's something where if you were going to be making a character as part of a party, you might want to take some into account of like trying to balance things out a little bit. But so let's go ahead and, you know, we can assign a physical D10 because we definitely have one of those that have to be. So like, okay, so a suggestion for physical, they could be tough. Well, in that case, of these 6 physical skills, well, so intimidating, like there's also the social skill of presence that we could have them, get, but that's a social skill. But so maybe power, like if they're just physically strong, like that could go into, the idea that maybe they do have kind of an intimidating physique, right? And so maybe if we want to go with that, let's go ahead and maybe go over to the social skills, and we say maybe for presence we also want to have a D10, right? So note one thing that happens here when I assign this D10, right? Like we didn't have a special social D10 that we can assign, but we have a D10 that we can assign to any skill. So how do we make this 1 and this -1 both be zeros? Well, there's a special little checkbox just for that. So when this is the any checkbox, and it says, you know, if you hover over it, it's not showing on the stream, but it has a little tooltip that comes up that says select to use any field for this this dice. So what that means is if I'm wanting to use this any dice to apply to this skill, I just check that box and we zero out. So likewise, when I want to assign these 3 D6s, these 2 D8s, and these 2 +1s, I will, you know, the +1s naturally would also kind of go in there. But so, so let's start filling out some of the rest. You know, what we've assigned so far is kind of just social and physical stuff. We haven't really done any mental stuff, but maybe this, like, maybe this character, if they're kind of just this big, strong, and maybe like physically kind of intimidating, but also really sensitive, Kithook with a big heart who just wants to find someone to love, like that's an adorable character. I really like that. So maybe we don't need to put too much into mental necessarily. Doesn't mean that they're dumb, but I like this idea. Like, you know, it's kind of like the trope of the himbo, right? Which, you know, is not necessarily a character who is stupid, but it's someone who's big and strong, but also really sensitive and sweet. I love that. I love that idea. Okay, so let's start figuring out what else do we want to add to make that true about our character. So probably if we want to envision this character, we would also want to say probably like maybe athletics and melee we would want to improve some. And then for social, we've already got a good empathy and presence, maybe a little. I don't know. I was just about to say maybe a little bit of suave, but I also kind of feel like if we're sort of aiming for this, like this, you know, big, sweet, but maybe not super smart character, maybe suave doesn't feel quite right. You know what I mean? But let's see. Decorum would be like, do they really know how to be polite in yeah, okay. So maybe decorum is a good one to not be to have it be a little, you know, like middle of the road. So maybe we put a D8 in decorum. So we select D8 and then we check the any box. And then perform would be like if he's good at performing, but I don't know if that feels right. So let's go back to physical and say, what if we just go ahead and assign like I think athletics makes sense to be, you know, good at that one. So we can add another D8 there. And then maybe D6 for melee. And so now we have 2 more D6s and 2 more skills that we can improve by 1. So let's see. We've already got good power. We could make ranged. Let's go ahead and, you know, have this character be good at a lot of fighting things. Skullduggery and stealth don't feel right, for this character concept. So let's look back over at mental and say, yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, we don't have to have him completely bare bones with mental stuff. So computers, engineering, medicine, knowledge, perception, streetwise. Perception seems like it fits well with someone with high empathy, right? Like they don't have to be book smart, but like they notice stuff, right? I feel like that makes sense. So we could go ahead and check that. So now notice we have all zeros for all of these, except we've got these +1s. So here's where we can go in to any of these D4s or any of the ones that we've already said, already set a die for. Except the D12s are the only ones that like that's as high as it can go. But for example, if we wanted to say this power at a D10, if we wanted that to actually be a D12, this is where we could add a +1 to it. So are there any of these skills that we've talked about so far that we feel like we want to boost a little bit more? Or, for example, we could also, you know, Maceo has suggested perception or streetwise. Maybe we could use one of our +1s to make that streetwise into a D6 instead of a D4. Right? So if we do that, we actually leave it as a D4, but we use this column here to do our +1. And so now it's interesting here to note that this stays D4, but because we have the +1, the end result is the D6. And that's how you do this table. Yeah, so let's see, and maybe we max out power. Yeah, I think that's also good. So let's go ahead and do that. So now that means power and empathy are the 2 strongest skills for this character. But then they also are very like good at presence. Like they can be really intimidating when they want to be. But they also are pretty good at knowing how to be polite and having good manners. They're pretty good at you know, various physical things. And maybe they don't have a lot of formal education, but you know, they're not totally oblivious to things. They notice things happening. They have a little bit of experience dealing with people in the world. I like all of that. So now that we have our whole table here has been fully zeroed out, we'll go ahead and click next and talk about abilities. So in the chat, Maceo suggests I have a question about abilities when you get to them. We've gotten to them. So one of the things that we start here is that there's one already chosen here, and that's because with the different species, some of them have certain special abilities just to start. For example, the Driftlings have change form to start. Like, they all have that, so everyone gets it. And so by comparison, the Kithook, everyone has, as the free species ability, this defense position. And this is a neat thing where basically they can just sort of like hunker down into a defense stance. You activate it at the start of your turn. You cannot take actions other than to move this turn. You remain in the defense position until the start of your next turn. But while in defense position, you ignore the first attack that successfully hits you, and any subsequent attacks can only do a maximum of 1 damage. And so that's kind of cool. You know, you can just sort of like, all your exoskeleton, you just sort of hunker into your personal armor. Yeah, so the question of how do you keep track of how many abilities you get at this point, that is a good question, and it's one that I had too when I was starting to fill this out. Because if we go back to culture and just look at what it says we get, right? You know, for urban, we get 1 special ability, right? And then for diversity, it says another special ability and 2 Nova abilities, which is tracked separately. And then that would be it. So per these bonuses, we would expect only 2. Right? But when we look over here, we start with the free one, and then there's a spot for 1, spot for 2, and then there's 2 more open spots. Now, my understanding, based on doing a little bit of searching around, is that you don't, by default, fill out all of them. If the bonuses says you get 2, then you get 2, and you leave the other 2 blank. And I think what happens there is it might just be a quirk of how the character sheet works, that like it starts with 2 spots, and then when you get those 2 additional ones, it just adds them. And so it's basically you get more special abilities as you do some of your story path things, and so it's spots for future expansion, I guess. But it's a little bit confusing because, for example, if we picked a culture that gave us a different amount of special abilities, the number here would also change, but it would still also be 2 extra from whatever it says we get. And so I wasn't sure if that was supposed to mean everyone starts with 2 and then you get 2, you get however many more. But that's my, like, trying to read through all of the rules about it. I don't think that's the case. There's nothing I could find anywhere that says you start with some number and then everything else is bonus. So if our culture says we get 2, that's how many we choose. Now, obviously, that's something that you could work out with your your game master and that sort of thing. But yes, that's my understanding, having tried to look it up a little bit, because it's another thing that is not necessarily obvious just looking at the sheet, because it looks like there's 4 spots. Why wouldn't you fill out all 4, right? But so now let's talk about some of the special abilities we can choose. Look at this list. Look how many of these there are. Lots of things. But now that we have kind of a character concept, this is where we want to start thinking about, like, okay, which of the special abilities feel like they work with that? Yeah, and so I agree. It does feel weird that it has those extra spots, because it feels like the character mancer shouldn't present you with stuff that you're supposed to leave blank right now. So I don't know if that's, maybe they want to fix it, or maybe that's just like it's a solution to some other problem, hard to say. But in any event, let's look at some of these. So let's pull up some of the choices. Well, one right off the bat is heavy hit, which sounds appealing based on our concept. If we chose heavy hit, what that says is when you make a successful attack skill roll using a melee weapon against an enemy, you can spend 1 advantage to do an extra damage. That's not bad. True Friend. True Friend requires some prerequisites, and it looks like actually there's several prerequisites that we need for that. So we wouldn't be able to take that one right away because it actually has 3 prerequisites. But if we felt like we wanted that one, eventually what we might say is maybe we should take, you know, the ones that we take now could be some of the prerequisites for that, right? So this one would, if we wanted True Friend, that would require a prerequisite of take the pain, avenge the fallen, and come with me. So like take the pain, what that does is when an ally adjacent to you is hit by an attack, you can redirect the attack to hit you instead. Does not work on attacks that affect multiple targets. Come with me requires take the pain. So if we wanted come with me, we would have to take the pain first. And but what that does is when you take a movement action, if an ally is in an adjacent square at the start of your turn, you may carry them with you during your movement, providing the ally is willing. If you do, when you end your movement, place their character in an unoccupied adjacent space of their choice. That's kind of fun, and that seems like it sort of maybe fits with our idea, like the idea that this is our big bruiser who's taking care of his buddies on the field. So let's see, True Friend also needed Avenge the Fallen. Where is that one? There it is. Avenge the Fallen also needs Take the Pain. So when an ally you can see is reduced to 0 health levels by an enemy attack and you are within your movement speed of the enemy who made the attack, you may immediately move to an adjacent square to that enemy and make a complexity 3 attack roll against the enemy. That's fun. So like one option here is we could do Take the Pain and then either Avenge the Fallen or Come with Me. And then once we have the opportunity to add some more special abilities, we could take the remaining ones, eventually working up to True Friend, which you connect with another player on a deep level who becomes a true friend. When you take this ability, choose one of their skills to be linked to you. Anytime you can see your true friend and you're using the chosen skill, you may use the skill roll with the die size of their skill. So that's fun. And you can actually do this multiple times. Let's see. Yeah, so like theoretically, the idea here is that like, you know, our Kithook here is not skilled at computers, but if they make true friends with one of the other players that is really good at computers, the idea is like you're so close with them that you've picked up on some of that skill, and so you might, when you can see them, you have such this intimate relationship that like you can use their skill ability. That's kind of neat. But let's see what some of the other choices are. Back-to-back fighting when you're adjacent to an ally, reduce the complexity of defense. Basically makes defense earlier. Family camaraderie. When you meet a friendly Kithook you haven't met before, you get a bonus to mental skills for the next 24 hours. That's pretty good. Killer advantage. You gain an advantage when you reduce an enemy to 0 health levels. Well, one note, Prince Justin in the chat says the Transformer bots, the Peacecraft, would be really do well with that ability on a tactical level. But here's the thing. This list is only the Kithook list. Peacecraft have their own list. So they definitely have stuff associated with their ability to carry people around in their cockpit. But yeah, it's a different list. This list that we're talking about is just the Kithook list. I think there might be some overlap, but I think they're mostly all different lists. Because the whole idea here is that this is the special abilities you have because you're a Kithook. And so that means that they don't overlap with the other species because they have their own special species abilities. So let's see, we've got Strength of Spirit. When using a weapon with the draining quality, you can spend an advantage to ignore the loss of health at levels. And so a lot of these obviously are just different ways to interact with some of the rules. Stunning hit. That seems, a lot of these are pretty straightforward. But see, here's wings, right? So wings requires a prerequisite of evolution. So let's look at evolution. If we were to take the evolution species ability, you gain 2 more legs, which allows you to run faster than you could before, and so you get to increase your movement speed. And so that would mean you can move 7 squares per turn instead of 5. One interesting thing, too, in terms of movement speed in this game is that every time you have a turn, you get your movement speed for free once. But then you can go as many more times as you want. You know, we didn't really talk about combat, but essentially you just make another skill check to try to do more movement, right? So if you wanted to move 10 squares and your movement speed is 5, you get 5 for free, and then you could get the other 5 by making a skill check to try to do it. And we'll talk a little bit more about combat maybe once we finish with our character here, because there's some neat stuff in there. Radiant friendliness. Oh, that seems fun. Your mere presence on a spaceship makes the long trips more friendly and enjoyable. Increase the livability rating of your ship by 1. That seems fun. The livability rating of your ship, in addition to having just sort of abstract metatextual storytelling value, is that the number of Nova points you can accumulate and the number of advantages that you can have in any given combat is capped by the livability rating of your ship. But that seems like a fun flavor one. Thickened shell requires some of these other things. Locked down. When you make a successful attack roll with a melee weapon against a target that is the same size or smaller than you, the target of the attack is grabbed, and neither you nor they can move for as long as you're grabbed. As long as they are grabbed. That's fun. So basically, like it's like an automatic grapple, where they can attack you, but they can't break the grab because you've basically got the armor plates that like you sort of just clamp down on them. That's kind of fun. I don't know. So I kind of like based on the flavor that we had, like the take the pain, this ability to, like when an ally next to you is hit, you can choose to take the hit instead. I feel like that fits with our character, right? So let's maybe dual strike, spend an advantage to make an extra attack. You know what? Let's just do radiant friendliness. I just feel like that those both feel in keeping with our character concept, right? The idea that they would be willing to take the attack for a friend, and also that they're just so nice. They're fun to be around. They make they're just, you enjoy hanging out with them. I like that. So that would be our 2 special abilities, the special species abilities. And again, there's 2 blank ones that we leave blank for now. I think, even though that's a little confusing as we discussed. So we would click up here next to go to the Nova abilities. And so here it's a little bit the same. Like there's 3 spots, but if we go back to culture and look at this, we should be getting 2 Nova abilities. So for the abilities here, there's 2 extra special abilities, 1 extra Nova ability, because there's 3 spots, but we should be getting 2. So, so let's look at the Nova abilities. And again, this is a list that's distinct to the species as well. But these are the abilities that you can use only when you have a Nova point. Like Total Shell, you can spend a Nova point to reduce any damage you take to 0 until the start of your next turn. Prophetic Vision. Spend 1 Nova point to have a vision of the future. Comfort Healing. Spend one Nova point when you're not in combat to remove all conditions afflicting an ally. Work together. Spend one Nova point to generate one advantage per ally that you can see. We are friends. One Nova point to charm a standard weak or minion creature who has spent at least 5 minutes talking with you. The creature cannot attack you for the next 24 hours unless you harm it first. Unwavering Support. Oh wait, I clicked the wrong thing. Unwavering Support. You can spend one Nova point when you lose your last health level to gain health levels equal to the number of allies that you can see that have at least one health level remaining. Oh, that's kind of like, you know, oh, can't go unconscious, must save my friends. That's kind of fun. In Tune. In Tune has a prerequisite of focused, so let's look at focused first. Would you spend one Nova point, and for the rest of the round, all attack skill rolls you make with melee weapons are complexity 3, no matter how many attack actions you have per turn. That requires us to briefly have an aside about combat. The way combat works, you know, I described the way that the checks have a difficulty outside of combat, but an interesting feature of the combat is you can make as many actions as you want on a turn, but the first one is always difficulty 2. The second one is always difficulty 3. The third one is always difficulty 4. And so basically, the more you keep trying to do, each one is progressively harder and harder to do. And you can keep going until you fail one. But when you fail one, it's not just, oh, that didn't work, I missed my attack. There's always a consequence. Either something extra happens that makes it worse than just a miss, say, or you give a collapse point to the game master, which can allow them to activate certain like enemy abilities and stuff like that. So what that means in this Nova ability is that you can spend your Nova point if you have one, and now for that turn, you're just making difficulty 3 instead of it going up and up and up at every time. So potentially you could end up making a lot of attacks in that round if you just keep passing them. So that's kind of neat. Let's see. Rampage. Spend a Nova point to make a complexity 2 attack roll, and then move up to your speed and make a second complexity 2 attack roll, and then do it again. And then like so you basically so it basically just lets you make a bunch of different attacks as long as they're on multiple targets. Body Breaker. Spend a Nova point when you make a successful attack roll with a melee weapon to do 3 extra damage. Ooh, that's intense. How is that different from Heavy? Oh, Heavy Hit was a special ability. This is a Nova. Yeah. Let's Hyper Wings. I would imagine you have to have wings. Spend a Nova point to increase your movement speed by 10 for 10 minutes. Ooh, that would be really fast. Yeah, and yeah, it's, as mentioned in the chat, yeah, only the players roll. Like the assumption is, phase 1, the GM says what the enemies are intending to do. So it might be like, oh, this guard is going to try to shoot our Kithook with his laser pistol. And then phase 2 would be, now it's our turn, and we have to try to either kill the guard before he can attack, defend against it, move out of range, or anything like that. And then in phase 3, if we have not otherwise avoided the attack in some way, it automatically hits. In Tune is very cool, but it's, you know what, I like comfort healing as part of our big heart boy here. I like that. And let's also say yeah, I don't know, like what was the hurl weapon? Spend a Nova point to make a single attack skill roll with a melee weapon against all creatures in a 20... Wait, what? Okay. You can spend 1 Nova point to make a single attack skill roll with a melee weapon against all creatures in a 20 square straight line from your current square. The attack is capable of going through thin walls and lands in the last square of the line. If the attack is successful, it deals damage to all creatures in the line. So, that would be, it's like, lightning bolt. Like, you throw your laser sword or something, and you're throwing it away from you, but you can hit everyone in that line. That's pretty neat. Let's see. You know what? Let's just do that. Let's just use that, and we can move on for that. So our Nova abilities here, we got Comfort Healing, which when we're not in combat, we can heal conditions from an ally, and then we can also get real mad and throw our weapon. So that's abilities. Next, equipment. So equipment we buy with Argent, and so once we selected culture, some of these, obviously, like, because we were inclusive, we started with 5,000 Argent. Because we were in an intermediate economic thing, we got another 5,000 of Argent. So we have 10,000 Argent to work with. Now, one of the things to notice here is that you don't have to spend all of it. You can spend up to that much, but you can choose to not spend all of it and then still have some as your starting character, right? So the things that you can buy, like, there's a lot of stuff in here, and like this list includes a lot of silly things that aren't necessarily super important, like, for example, tabletop role-playing game you can buy for 200 Argent. And like, if we pull that up here, all manner of games are enjoyed in Alaxis, especially by crews of adventurers on long flights together. Here are the most popular games in the galaxy. Tabletop role-playing game Project Centurion, where the game master runs the game for a group of 3 or more players who are all spies investigating supernatural conspiracies and mysteries. And what does it do mechanically? Nothing. But you have it, and you can, play with it for the story. So some of the things are like that. But then some of them obviously are more relevant. So important for our character based on what we have established their skills to be, right? When we look at physical, so we got them as relatively good at melee and ranged. Like, they're not the best, but they're okay, middling at that. So probably we would at least want them to have a melee weapon and a ranged weapon, right? So let's, and you can pull up any of these to look at all the details for like a charge baton versus... I don't think a regular baton is one of these things, but a charge baton, one of the interesting things about how charge works, charge 5 means that you can use it to do normal damage, but once you have made enough actions that you're rolling a difficulty 5, if you hit with a difficulty 5 or higher roll, then you do extra damage. But given that we're only D6 for those things, it's not necessarily going to be super useful. Like, we're going to have a hard time passing, charge like a difficulty 5. So we probably want something that doesn't require that level of. I mean, it could still be like it could still just do normal damage, right? Like, it doesn't have to be anything. But let's just go ahead and give them a basic like let's give them a laser sword, because who doesn't want a laser sword, right? One of the things that I think is neat that they establish about laser swords in this setting is that they specifically make it clear right here that each laser sword is magically tuned to its wielder so that they are not harmed when touching the sword, which is basically like saying, if it's your lightsaber, the blade can't hurt you. That's kind of neat, right? I like that a lot. I think that's very cool. So I think our Kithook gets a laser sword. And so you notice, as I say, we've purchased one, it automatically deducted the price of that from the argent remaining. But we probably also don't want to give them a arranged so maybe just a laser pistol or a laser rifle. Given that they've got the laser sword for when they're close up, and the laser rifle is for slightly more distant. I feel like that makes sense. So, and you notice, for example, if you look at this, laser rifle range 40 versus laser pistol has range 30. So it basically means that a laser rifle is slightly more expensive, but you can attack something from a longer distance away. So let's just go ahead and give them a laser rifle as well. Now, other basic things that they would probably want to have. There's I think there's like a communications badge that would probably make sense that they would want to have. Communications badge. They would want to probably have a smart slab, which is kind of the equivalent of an iPad, right? Makes sense, some of those basic things. Now, some of the other stuff that they could, like some of the other things that are included in here are like military shield generator, tools, magic strings. Like, what do the magic strings do? Okay, let's see. It's basically just a musical instrument. That's interesting. These magic is it's a musical instrument that can powered by magic to be amplified and modified to make different sounds. That's kind of neat. But then you can also get like an armor suit that is lets you like go underwater. You could get one that lets you go into space. Other various things like, I mean, it's got a lot of the sorts of basic things that you feel like you might want to get. Like, you know what? I've just decided that instead of the baton, so we didn't get a charged baton, but there's a charged staff. Like you get charged chaku, is basically like, yeah, it's like nunchucks. Okay. Yeah, let's see. We could get a disguise badge, binding net, binoculars, grenades. Sure, let's get a couple grenades. Oh, you can never have too many grenades. Any other, like, there's so much stuff here that if you're just shouting out like various things that you might feel like this character might want to have, there's probably on there. So like, we could get a submersible for 50,000 argent if we had that much. Space armor suit would cost 10,000. Vampire rifle has the draining quality, and the basic idea there is that when you use a draining weapon, what that means is that you essentially pay one of your own health levels to do more damage with it. But one of our abilities was that we could have selected that you can ignore that property of it. So yeah, so that's like a lot of these sorts of things. Maybe let's maybe get oh look, a flying armor suit. How about oh, you know what? We have exactly 6,000, which is exactly the amount for a climate-controlled armor suit. So what that does is it's an armor suit that, let's see, while wearing the armor suit, you reduce the complexity of skill rolls to avoid physical attacks by 1. So that would mean that, like, if you wanted to try to defend against an attack, even if it was the third roll on your turn, and so it should have a difficulty 4, you would only roll difficulty 3 because of your armor. And climate-controlled armor suits allow you to survive the temperature of extreme environments without the need to make skill rolls. So yeah, sure, let's go ahead and get one of those too. All right, so that is all of our money spent. And so it's noting here too that if we were completing this section with some leftover money, it would go to the group chat. So basically just everyone would know, like this is the group pool of Argent that everyone could potentially share. Yeah, so we see here in the thing. Notice it actually still, the character sheet name here is still not what we selected in you know, here is our character sheet name here. We'll adjust it on the actual Roll20 sheet in a moment. But so here's where we can just review, and we can just click through and see all these different things that we chose, etc. Now, one of the things that is going to happen when I click finish, probably, see, you have some empty fields, and I think, I'm not sure what that's about, because the thing is, I have tried going into those special abilities, you know, those extra fields, and filling those out. I've tried doing that, and it still gives this message. So I'm not sure if there's another, like, maybe small glitch there, or if I'm misunderstanding something. But yeah, so if we just go ahead and say we're willing to continue, we're going to finish and populate the character sheet. All right, so here we go. And then when we finished, it went ahead and it updated the name for us automatically. So now we have our character sheet. And so one of the things that it's also worth noting here is that the health level, we don't actually have 0 out of 10. Those are like placeholder values. All characters start with 3 health levels unless they take a special ability or something that lets them have more. So we would actually have 3. And because we didn't buy a shield, we have 0 shield charges. So we'd go ahead and do that. And so all characters start with a movement speed of 5, again, unless you take a special ability or something that would allow you to change it. But so now you can see here's all of our different skills. So if we wanted to roll one of these power skills, and one of the things that's important to notice too, that I want to take back some of what I was saying earlier, implying that because melee is a D6, that means that we might have a hard time, you know, doing, you know, the difficulty 5 with the D6. Yeah, but I forgot that, again, even in combat, if I want to attack with my laser sword, I don't have to use the melee skill. What we can establish is that this character, he's just so strong that his technique is just basically brute force. And so he doesn't have like the same skill that a really trained swordsman might have, but he makes up for it with brawn, right? And so I want to attack with my laser sword using the power skill instead of the melee skill. And that's 100% allowed. But the only reason that you might not want to always do that is because sometimes you want to use your other skills so that you eventually accumulate, Nova points, right? So that's kind of how some of that works. So, you know, we've got our movement speed, no Nova points to start with. All of this stuff is on here, up here, and then we can look at our story path. Here's our love story path. And so if, you know, as we would complete these, we would check them off here. We have our special abilities. It describes what they do, and it shows that we've got the, you know, these 2 empty ones. And again, it's like it's got the blank, anywhere it's showing red text, you should take that to mean that you can, the red text is not intended to be, like, it's like a placeholder spot. It's not meant to actually be meaningful there. And yes, in the chat, yes, allies can help too. Part of what you can do in combat is when you do a skill roll to either gain information or to try to set up your ally to do something helpful, and you succeed, what you do is you create an advantage. And an advantage, like if, for example, I am trying to do an attack and it's a difficulty 5, I can use one of the advantages in the pool to make it a difficulty 4 instead. Right? And then also there are some special abilities that use advantages in order to activate. And then so Nova, here's our Nova abilities, and again it's got the extra blank one here, which I don't know if we can remove it. Yeah, so we can remove it with the just so it's not confusing that it's there empty. We just have to activate the edit tool, delete these extra ones. So now we don't have those confusing extra ones. And then here's the equipment. And like some of these like list charges even if it's not something that necessarily takes a charge. So that's just kind of that's sort of a formatting thing. But it just has all the description of what your thing does here, and then conditions if you had some. And so that's building a character in Burn Bryte. Now, one of the things that we haven't done yet that we could do is we could make a ship character sheet. But I feel like I haven't prepared that as much, and we've been going pretty long. So I think I'm going to leave it there, but there's a lot more to this game because it definitely has spaceships and spaceship combat too, and a lot of different lore, and I think it's very cool. I'm excited to try to run this some. So maybe I'll just go ahead and leave it for now. But thank you everybody for coming to watch me play around, and for us to make our very sweet Kithook boy who just wants to find love. Good old Griza Globtrot just wants to fall in love with somebody, have a sweetie, and all of that against the backdrop of intergalactic adventure. So we'll leave it there for now. If you want to follow this channel or subscribe, I run a lot of Dungeons and Dragons on Tuesday. We have a level 20 campaign going right now that's getting close to wrapping up. But we run other things there too sometimes. And then of course I've got YouTube and Twitter and all of that sort of thing. So check that stuff out if you want. And in the meantime, I'll see you around, and hope you play some good games. All right. Good night.